At my mom's birthday, my dad raised his glass and said, "She has two sons. One turned into somebody while the other is simply there." Can you imagine your own father, at your mother's 60th birthday, raising a toast and openly, brutally comparing you to your brother? He said, "She has two sons. One has become somebody, while the other is just there." Everyone laughed. That night, I paid the bill, walked out, and made a single phone call that changed everything. I'm Eric, 29 years old. And for most of my life, I've been the invisible one in a family that never really made much room for me. If my older brother, Jason, got a B, it was, "Oh, he must have had a tough exam." If I got an A, it was, "Well, that's expected from someone who doesn't have a real job." And yeah, that was actually said once at the dinner table by my dad. My mom just smiled softly and changed the subject, like she always did. That was pretty much the dynamic. Jason shines. Dad praises. Mom pacifies. And I just quietly shrink a little more each year. But I'm not some moody, brooding martyr, okay? I've built a good life. A quiet life, sure, but one that matters to me. I'm a software engineer, freelancing mostly. Not flashy, not social media worthy, but stable. I live in a cozy one-bedroom apartment I actually own, drive a decent car I paid off early, and I have a handful of friends who actually listen when I talk. And maybe because I never really got that at home, I value it more than anything else. I'm definitely not flashy like Jason. He's a real estate agent with flashy suits, an Instagram full of gym selfies and leased BMWs, and a girlfriend who makes influencer reels of them kissing in matching outfits. My dad absolutely loves it. "That's what success looks like," he said once, scrolling through one of Jason's reels, not even noticing I was in the room. But I'm not here to vent about every moment of my childhood that chipped away at my self-worth. I'm here to tell you what happened at my mom's 60th birthday dinner. The one that changed everything. It started like any other obligatory family gathering. A fancy restaurant I didn't pick, a group text I was added to last minute, and an unspoken assumption that I'd show up, smile, and stay quiet. I got there on time, gift in hand. It was a framed photo of me and Mom from when I was 5, taken on one of the rare days she took me out alone. I had it restored and put in a simple, elegant walnut frame. It wasn't expensive, but it meant something. She smiled when she unwrapped it, maybe even got a little misty-eyed. But then Jason handed her a box, designer jewelry, of course, and suddenly the photo was quietly set aside, like a receipt. Dinner went as expected. Jason held court with stories about his latest property deal, about networking with high-value clients, and Dad hung on to every word like it was gospel. I nodded along politely, chewing my overpriced steak in silence. I tried to talk to Mom at one point, ask her about the painting classes she mentioned she wanted to try, but before she could answer, Dad interrupted with, "Eric, don't you want to ask your brother how he closed on that Beverly Hills townhouse? You could learn a thing or two." I laughed quietly. I've learned to do that. To swallow the sting. Turn it into a sound that won't make things worse. I made a joke about needing to finish my piece first, and everyone chuckled, even if it was at me. Jason winked like he was in on something I wasn't. I don't think he even meant to be cruel. He never has to try. It just comes naturally. But then came the moment. The one that didn't sting. The one that punched. The waiter brought out the dessert, some kind of custom cake Jason's girlfriend had picked out, with edible gold leaf and Mom's name typed in perfect cursive. Everyone applauded like it was the opening ceremony of the Olympics. And then Dad stood up, wine glass in hand, clearing his throat dramatically like he was about to give a speech at the Oscars. "I just want to say," he began, already beaming at Jason, "how proud I am of this family, of how far we've come. Especially of you, son." He raised the glass in Jason's direction. "You've become someone. You've built something, made us proud. You're everything a man should strive to be." Jason did his usual modest shrug, the kind that somehow still managed to look arrogant, and gave a little nod of appreciation. And then Dad turned to me. "And you, he said, smiling like he was about to say something sweet. Thank you for staying exactly where you belong. I blinked. For a second, I thought I misheard him. But then I looked around and saw them all laughing. Mom gave one of her gentle, closed-lip smiles. Jason outright chuckled. And his girlfriend, whose name I still didn't know after a year, laughed so hard she nearly spilled her rose. I froze. My brain fired off every possible response. A sarcastic comeback. A dry, thanks. Maybe even getting up and leaving. But all I did was smile. A little too wide. A little too late. And I nodded. They didn't notice the smile didn't reach my eyes. They never do. I quietly called the waiter over, asked for the bill, and paid the entire thing. Tip included. Nearly $600. Nobody noticed. Or maybe they did, and just assumed it was the least I could do for being the family disappointment. Then I stood, gently pushed my chair in and said, I've got an early meeting tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your night. Mom offered a week. Thanks for coming, sweetheart. Dad just said, drive safe. Jason raised his glass again, like he was toasting me for the role I played, the background character in his success story. I walked out into the cold night air and sat in my car for a few minutes, just staring at the steering wheel. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. Not yet. I felt clear, like something had finally clicked. I picked up my phone, scrolled to a contact I hadn't used in months, stared at the name for a second. Then I pressed call. The voice on the other end picked up on the second ring. Eric, wow, it's been a while. Yeah, I said, voice steady. I think it's time we talked about that offer. And just like that, everything changed. But they wouldn't find out until it was too late. I didn't tell anyone what the call was about. Not Dad, not Mom, not even my few close friends. It wasn't out of spite or drama. I just needed it to be mine for once. Something that wasn't inspected, compared, or casually dismissed. The man I called, his name's Raj, was an old college friend. Brilliant guy, always a few steps ahead of everyone else. And not just in tech. We had talked 6 months ago, briefly after he launched a new startup focused on secure AI-integrated back-end tools for government contracts. I'd helped him on a few freelance gigs before, but nothing permanent. At the time, he'd made an offer. Full-time role, senior dev, remote-friendly, with a stake. I told him I wasn't ready back then.
But now?
Now I was more than ready. I didn't tell him about the dinner or my dad's toast, or how I paid for a cake I didn't eat while being the punchline at my mom's birthday. I didn't need to. He just said, I had a feeling you'd call. And we spent the next hour talking about specs, onboarding, and the kind of infrastructure he wanted me to lead. It felt like someone finally saw me for more than what I wasn't. By the end of the week, I'd signed. And it wasn't just a job. It was a way out. The funny thing is, once you know you're done trying to win someone's approval, the mask slips easier. I still saw my family in the weeks that followed, but I stopped making myself small. When Jason bragged about his sales numbers, I didn't fake interest. When Dad joked about how some people settle for safe careers, I didn't laugh. I just said, it's not about flash, it's about freedom. He blinked like I'd spoken another language. Mom gave me that warning look, the one that begged me not to rock the boat, but I let the silence hang anyway. And it wasn't just dinners. Jason came to me one afternoon, a month later, all buddy energy and crocodile charm. Said he was thinking about getting into the tech space. Asked if I could connect him with Raj. Just for a coffee chat, he insisted. Nothing serious. I told him I'd think about it. I didn't. I wasn't about to hand over the one thing in my life that was finally mine. Not when he was already knee-deep in leased cars and empty business cards. But this wasn't even the breaking point. That came in March, 3 months after Mom's birthday. It was a Sunday, overcast, quiet, and I was in the middle of a deep refactor of a legacy system when Mom called. Hey, sweetheart, she said. We're having a little family cookout this afternoon. Jason's bringing that new brisket recipe he learned. Today? I asked. It's already noon. You're just now inviting me? Oh, we figured you were probably busy. You always are with those computer projects. I stared at my screen, line after line of code. I could have lied, said I had a deadline. But something in her voice, the dismissive familiarity of it, twisted in my chest. You already invited Jason, though. Well, yes, but that's different. He has to rearrange a lot to be here. I wanted to ask her what she thought I rearranged every time I drove across town for dinners where I barely spoke. But I didn't. I just said, sure, I'll come by. When I arrived, it was like walking into a movie set already in motion. Jason's car, now a Tesla, was front and center. Music was playing. Kids, his girlfriend's nephews, apparently, were running around. People I didn't recognize were chatting in the backyard like they lived there. I spotted Jason at the grill, spatula in hand, wearing an apron that said, Grill King. Of course. Eric, he called out. You made it. I forced a smile. Hey. He handed me a beer like we were frat brothers and clapped me on the back. Dad's inside. He's going to love this brisket. I made my way into the house, already regretting showing up. Mom greeted me with a distracted kiss on the cheek. Oh, good. You're here. Can you help Jason with the side dishes? Sure, I said. But the real punch didn't come until after dinner. We were all sitting outside, plates balanced on laps, when Dad stood again, this time holding a can of beer instead of a wine glass. I just want to say, he began, and I tensed. How proud I am to see our family growing. Jason's been killing it this year. 2 new sales offices, a podcast interview, and now, he beamed, he's officially making more in a month than I did in my best year. Applause. Laughter. A few guests even whistled. Jason grinned, humble brag mode engaged. Couldn't have done it without the support of the best family ever. And then Dad, drunk off pride, turned toward me and said, and Eric, buddy, thanks for fixing the Wi-Fi last week. There was a beat of silence. Then someone, I think Jason's girlfriend, giggled. That was it. My contribution to the family. Fixing the Wi-Fi. I didn't say anything. Didn't make a scene. I just stood, set my plate down, and said I had a migraine. Mom barely looked up. Oh no. Feel better, sweetheart. No one stopped me. Not even Jason, who was too busy basking in the glow of his applause. I got in my car, drove halfway home, then pulled over at a park, and sat on a bench staring at the lake. I wanted to cry. Not because I was hurt, not exactly, but because I was finally done pretending it didn't hurt. And that's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to just attach. I wasn't going to go quietly and live a parallel life while they cheered for someone else. I was going to show them exactly what I'd built. Not to earn their applause, but to make sure they could never laugh at me again. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. In April, Raj asked if I'd consider flying out to San Diego for a summit. He wanted me to demo one of the internal systems I'd quietly built, something that was already catching attention from 2 major clients. It was a big deal. We were talking 7-figure contracts, real stakes. I agreed. Spent weeks polishing my deck, refining every detail. When I walked into that summit, I wasn't Eric, the forgotten son. I was Eric Morgan, lead solutions architect for a startup poised to break into federal tech contracts. And when the pitch closed with applause and handshakes and 2 execs asking if we were open to acquisition discussions, I didn't smile because of the money. I smiled because I knew exactly what I was going to do next. You see, Jason had just announced, loudly and proudly, that he was starting a family newsletter. Some cheesy email chain meant to keep us all in the loop. He'd even roped Mom and Dad into it, promising updates, photos, and little spotlights on family milestones. I waited until the second issue. Jason opened it with his usual flair. Jason's Journal, Edition 2, followed by a list of his Q2 sales numbers, a picture of his new car, and a paragraph about the grind never stopping. He ended it by asking if anyone else had big news to share. So I replied. All I said was, hey, figured I'd drop a quick update. 2. Just closed a multi-million-dollar deal for our platform and got bumped to equity partner. We're likely expanding to 3 more countries by fall. Hope you're all well. I didn't attach photos. Didn't drop links. Just a quiet line in the middle of the noise. Jason didn't reply. Mom responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Dad said nothing. But something shifted after that. The next dinner, Jason wasn't quite as loud. Dad wasn't quite as smug. And Mom? She actually asked me what equity partner meant. And then came the moment that sealed everything. You'd think the big win, the deal, the promotion, the quiet flex in Jason's inbox would have felt like the turning point, and for a brief moment it did. I walked a little taller. My voice didn't crack when I spoke at family dinners. I stopped trying to be invisible. I even noticed Dad pausing once, just for a second, before making another snide remark about real jobs. He still said it, but that pause, it meant something. Like he wasn't as sure anymore. Like I was no longer the punchline. But that illusion shattered barely a month later. It started innocently enough. Raj called to say we'd been invited to present our platform at a private tech demo for a government innovation board. It wasn't just a conference or a deal. This was the kind of thing that could put our company on the map. Quiet rooms, big checks, policy influence, the kind of thing that changes not just a company but lives. Naturally, I told Mom. We were on the phone. She was telling me about some brunch Jason was throwing, apparently now with a catered mimosa bar, and I thought for once I'd interrupt her mid-brag. Hey Mom, I've got something cool, too. Raj and I are pitching to the federal board next month. It's invite only. Could change everything. There was a pause. Just 2 seconds. Then she said, "Oh, that's nice, sweetheart. So, you'll be traveling again." That was it. No curiosity. No, tell me more. No pride. Just shifting back to her own script. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Yeah, big opportunity. Well, I hope you have time to come to Jason's brunch the weekend before. He's renting a rooftop downtown. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just nodded and said I'd try. Spoiler, I didn't go. Instead, I focused. I put every waking hour into the presentation, polished it like glass, rehearsed until my voice was hoarse. And when the day came, I nailed it. Every question, every technical challenge, every concern, I handled them. Raj texted me an hour later. "You just bought our future." But 2 days later, everything crashed. Literally. A back-end exploit. One of our test systems was breached. It wasn't fatal, but it was embarrassing. Our code wasn't the issue, but the optics were bad. The board delayed their decision. Our team was thrown into emergency audit mode. Raj, for the first time ever, sounded shaken on a call. "We're fine," he kept saying. "We'll fix it, but we've got a brace." For the next 3 weeks, I barely slept. I ran on coffee and code. My personal life vanished. I missed texts, calls, even my rent payment. I didn't care. I was in fight mode. And in the middle of all that, my family decided to host a family appreciation dinner. I swear I'm not making that up. It was Jason's idea. He texted the whole family group chat. "Let's celebrate Mom and Dad for being our rock. Dinner at their place next Sunday. No excuses." I didn't reply. I couldn't. I was knee-deep in stress, trying to salvage my career. But 3 days before the dinner, I got a voicemail from Dad. Calm voice. That fake calm he uses when he's trying not to sound petty. "Eric, I know you're busy, but you need to make time for your family. You think we don't see you working? We do. But family comes first, always. Don't make your brother look like the only grateful one." I stared at my phone like it had grown horns. Don't make your brother look like the only grateful one. He wasn't helping me stay up until 4 a.m. fixing security patches. He wasn't making contingency decks for the board. He wasn't the one watching something he'd spent years building suddenly wobble on a national stage. But sure, Jason's catered rooftop brunch. That's gratitude. Still, I went. Because deep down, I still had this tiny flicker of hope that maybe they'd ask how I was. Maybe someone would notice the bags under my eyes or the way my hands were trembling from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. I showed up late, wore a wrinkled shirt, unshaven, exhausted. Mom opened the door and blinked. "Oh, honey, you look tired." That was it. I nodded and stepped inside. The dinner was already in full swing. Jason was playing some acoustic cover on a Bluetooth speaker. People were laughing. There were candles. A banner that said, "To the best parents ever," hung across the living room like it was a Hallmark movie set. And Jason, he was in rare form. "Glad you made it, bro," he said, handing me a drink I didn't ask for. We were just about to give speeches. Speeches. I should have left right then, but I didn't. I sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped, trying not to fall asleep. Jason started with a speech about how Mom and Dad taught him the value of hard work and ambition. He thanked them for never doubting his vision. Mom teared up. Dad looked like he'd won the lottery. Then he turned to me. And of course, Jason said, "We've got to thank Eric for always being around. Quiet support, you know. Every team needs someone like that." There was light laughter. Light. Like I was a flashlight or a houseplant. "Thanks for fixing the TV last week, too, man. Saved me from missing the game." More laughter. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Because if I didn't smile, I'd scream. Dad clinked his glass. "To Eric, our steady rock." That was it. That was their praise. That I existed. That I didn't implode. And in that moment, something inside me broke quietly, like a thread snapping in a dark room. I stood, said I wasn't feeling well, and walked out. No one followed me. Not even Mom. I got in my car and drove until I hit a rest stop. I sat there in the dark, shaking. Not with rage, but with exhaustion. I'd spent so long trying to prove I mattered. Not to the world, but to them. And here I was, partner in a groundbreaking company, fighting to save something massive. And all they saw was the guy who kept the Wi-Fi running and didn't complain too loudly. That night, I turned off my phone. And the next morning, I started over. Not with the company. I was still working harder than ever, actually. But I started over personally. I stopped trying to win. Stopped trying to show up. I started saying no. Mom called the next week to ask if I could help Jason set up a digital calendar system for his new assistant. I said I was too busy. Dad emailed asking if I could review a proposal Jason was working on for an app. I didn't even open it. Jason texted me, "Yo, you good?" I didn't reply. For the first time, I stopped feeding the machine and it changed me. I slept. Not much, but enough. I reconnected with an old friend from college, someone who actually asked about me. I started eating better, went for walks. The company stabilized. Raj called to say the board was back in play. The breach had actually impressed them. We'd handled it with transparency and resilience. "They like us even more now," he said. Crisis made us look mature. I smiled. Not because of the board, but because I felt it too. I was maturing. Not into someone new, but into someone I used to be before I was made small. I didn't need their applause. But I was about to get something better. Not revenge, not yet, but power. And what I did with that, well, that's where things start to get messy. I didn't plan revenge overnight. It wasn't like I stormed out of that dinner and immediately plotted some master takedown. At first, I just disengaged. Quietly, casually. And if that had been enough, if they just let me drift away in peace, maybe none of this would have happened. But they didn't. Because people like my family, they don't notice you until they need you. And then, when you stop showing up the way they're used to, it's like you've broken some unspoken contract. Like they're entitled to your time, your energy, your silence. It started with small things. Jason called, asking for help with a few lines of code for some startup pitch he was working on, something about a property management app that would revolutionize landlord-tenant relations. I said no. Then Mom texted, asking if I could help her reinstall some printer drivers. I ignored it. A week later, Dad left me a voicemail. "I don't know what's going on with you, Eric, but you're still part of this family. Don't forget that." The irony, of course, was that I'd never really been part of the family. I'd been a prop, a convenience, the background guy who made things work but never made things difficult. And I was finally done playing that role. But I wasn't just disappearing. I was preparing. A few days after Raj confirmed the federal board was back on, we had a call with one of the investors, a quiet guy named Thomas, who didn't talk much in meetings, but always asked smart questions when it counted. He requested a secondary meeting, just me and him. I didn't know what to expect, but I went. Turns out Thomas wasn't just an investor. He was a connector. Your system, he said, has government potential, sure, but it also has real estate applications, especially for high-value property portfolios. I blinked. Wait, like landlord-facing CRM tools. He nodded. Your brother's in real estate, right? That's when it clicked. Because Jason was in real estate and sloppy about it. Always looking for shortcuts. Always jumping from one shiny idea to the next without bothering to understand the tech. I remembered last year when he tried launching a referral site and outsourced the whole thing to a guy in Bulgaria who ghosted him halfway through. So I leaned in and asked Thomas, would you be open to backing a side module, something customizable for private brokers? He smiled. Pitch me. So I did. For the next 3 days, I barely slept again, but this time with a different fire. I created a shell system, a CRM-integrated suite tailored for luxury agents with AI-driven lead filtering, smart contract management, and instant property valuation overlays. Basically, everything Jason pretended he offered, but real. Raj saw the mock-up and whistled. You're onto something. I want to keep it separate, I told him. Just a pilot, no brand, no splash. Quiet rollout. He nodded. You need something for yourself. He didn't ask why. He just said, let me know when you need dev support. The next phase was slow, or subtle. I began poking around Jason's digital footprint. His LinkedIn was full of fluff. Growth strategist, visionary broker, networking disruptor. His Instagram was worse. But the real meat was in the companies he'd registered. I looked up the LLCs he posted about. 3 were inactive. 1 had been dissolved for tax delinquency. 1 was still active and hilariously underdeveloped. A half-baked website, a broken lead gen form, and a testimonials page that still had placeholder text. This is where your clients rave about your service. Classic Jason. So I bought the domain name he meant to get 1 letter off from his brand, but cleaner, more professional, and SEO optimized. Then I registered a shell company, Equismart Solutions, generic, safe, professional. I used it to host the new platform, the one that made Jason's system look like a GeoCities page. And then I waited. I didn't market it. I didn't tweet. I didn't run ads. I just made sure his clients could find it. I paid for a few targeted search ads with keywords like premium CRM for real estate agents, property automation suite, and here's the kicker, his business name. If you Google Jason's company, my platform popped up first. The click-through rate was insane. And after the first 2 brokers signed up for free trials, I turned on the paid tiers. Around that time, I started seeing shifts in Jason's posts. The usual swagger was still there, but now it was mixed with vague references to copycats and haters stealing ideas. He posted a story with a screenshot of my platform's homepage, blurred, but I recognized the layout with a caption, "Funny how some people can't build their own thing." I smiled, because he had no clue. It was me, but he would eventually. The next step was personal. I started seeing Mom again, but on my terms. Coffee shops, quiet lunches. And during one of those lunches, she let something slip. You know your brother's been struggling lately. I raised an eyebrow. Really? She stirred her tea. Something about clients pulling out. He's very stressed, snapping at everyone. I sipped my drink. That doesn't sound like Jason. She smiled sadly. It does, actually. And then she said something I didn't expect. I wish he were more like you. I didn't know what to say. For years, I'd longed to hear those words, or any version of them. But now that I had, they rang hollow. Too late. Too easy. I nodded. Thanks. She reached across the table. I just hope you two can make peace. You're both so talented. If only you worked together. I almost laughed. That'll never happen. But that gave me an idea. Jason had been pitching to a small luxury development group, trying to land a major listing deal for a waterfront property in Orange County. He'd been bragging about it in every family text thread for weeks. I knew the group, and I knew someone who knew them. So I made a call, not to sabotage, to compete. I demoed Equismart for them, not as a broker, but as a solution provider. I showed them analytics Jason couldn't dream of. Automated systems, predictive buyer modeling, integration with financial institutions for real-time qualification. They were impressed. Not by flash, by function. They dropped him within a week. He didn't know why, but his meltdown was spectacular. He posted a rant on Instagram about snake behavior and losers who piggyback off real talent. His captions got darker, more bitter. He even made a TikTok about how hard it is to build something when your own family doesn't support you. I watched it all in silence. And then the final piece fell into place. Mom invited me to a dinner. Not a holiday, not a birthday, just dinner. At their house. She said, "It would mean a lot if you came. Your dad misses you." I almost said no, but then I realized this was the perfect opportunity to end the show. Or rather, start it. Because what I was about to reveal, it wouldn't just shatter the family dynamic. It would burn the script they'd written for me, the one where I was always the quiet one, the helper, the afterthought. No more. And they had no idea what was coming. It was a warm Sunday evening when I pulled into my parents' driveway, half expecting to feel that old, familiar tightness in my chest. But for the first time in years, I didn't. I wasn't there to prove anything. I wasn't there to win affection or beg for recognition. I was there to close a chapter. Their porch light was already on, even though the sun hadn't set. The whole house was lit up like a celebration, which wasn't surprising. My mom always went all out when she hosted. Polished silverware, matching napkins, jazz playing softly in the background. But the vibe this time was different, more tense, as if they knew something was off, even if they couldn't quite name it yet. I stepped inside. Jason was already there, sitting at the dining table, tapping away on his phone, jaw tight. He reeked of stress. Mom gave me a soft smile and opened her arms for a hug. Dad gave me the usual one pat on the back version, like we were coworkers at a retirement party. We sat down. Dinner was already plated. Mom's rosemary chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, the kind of meal that was supposed to bring people together. But this time, I came with an appetite for something else. So, Mom began gently, folding her hands on the table like she was moderating a therapy session. I wanted us to all be here tonight. Things have been tense. Jason scoffed quietly, didn't look up from his phone. Dad cleared his throat. Yeah, it feels like you two have been at odds for months now. We're not trying to pick sides. But there are no sides, I said calmly. There's just truth. And there's habit. Jason finally looked up. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've spent years playing the role you all gave me, I said, keeping my voice steady. The quiet one. The fixer. The guy who helps behind the scenes while everyone else gets the spotlight. Jason rolled his eyes. Oh God, here we go. The martyr speech. I ignored him. But here's the thing. I'm not angry about it anymore. I understand why it happened. You need someone to play the contrast. You shine brighter when I stay dim. That got under his skin. His nostrils flared. That's crap and you know it. No, I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out my tablet. But this is not crap. I tapped the screen, waking it up, and slid it across the table. It showed the Equismart dashboard, live client metrics, conversion rates, CRM overlays, demo video thumbnails, and at the bottom, in the footer, my name. Eric Morgan, founder. Jason's eyes widened. He didn't speak, but I could see the blood draining from his face. Dad furrowed his brow. What is this? I looked at him. It's the platform your other son has spent the last 6 months quietly building. The one that's replacing your golden boy's outdated system. The one his clients are switching to because it actually works. Jason pushed his chair back abruptly, nearly knocking it over. You're the one behind Equismart.
Yep.
You stole my clients. His voice cracked, half rage, half panic. I tilted my head. I didn't steal anyone.
They came to me.
I just offered them something better. He stood, fists clenched. This is low, even for you. I stayed seated.
No, Jason.
Lo was laughing when Dad made that toast about me staying exactly where I belong. Lo was turning every dinner into a seminar about your sales stats while treating me like tech support. Lo was pretending I wasn't worth listening to unless I was fixing something for you. He looked to Dad for backup, but Dad just stared at the screen, mouth slightly open. I gave you every chance to treat me like an equal. I continued. I came to dinners. I paid the bill. I showed up, but none of it mattered because you weren't looking at me. You were looking through me. Mom was frozen. Her eyes were glassy. Sweetheart, why didn't you say something? I did. For years. Just not loud enough for you to hear. Jason paced at the end of the table, shaking his head. This is war. You really think this is going to make you the favorite? You think sabotaging me makes you better? I don't want to be the favorite, I said. I want to be free. And that was the truth. That's what they didn't get. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about release. I came tonight, I said, standing. Not to gloat, not to destroy anyone, but to draw a line. I looked at my parents. I'm done playing support character in a story I didn't write. I'm building my own world now, and you're welcome in it, but only if you respect me as I am. No more comparisons. No more dismissals. No more last-minute calls to fix your printer because Jason's too busy posting on Instagram. Jason sneered. You're pathetic. I smiled. Then stop losing clients to me. He didn't have a comeback. Mom stood still, wringing her napkin. I didn't know you were hurting so much. I know, I said. I wish I'd seen it sooner. I nodded. I wish you had, too. Dad finally broke his silence. So what now? You just walk away from us? I looked at him, steady.
No.
I walked towards something better. And if you want to be a part of it, really be a part of it, then meet me there. But I'm not dragging you anymore. And with that, I picked up my tablet, slid it back into my bag, and walked toward the door. I paused on the threshold. By the way, I added, without turning around, your internet's been acting up because your modem's outdated. You'll need to replace it. And this time, figure it out yourselves. I walked out to the sound of silence. No one followed. No one called my name. And as I got in my car and started the engine, I felt something strange, lighter than I'd felt in years. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread quietly. Jason lost 2 more clients. Rumor was one of them found out his testimonials page was fake and told others. He started posting less. His influencer girlfriend unfollowed him and posted a solo reset era announcement.
Ouch.
Mom called twice, left long emotional voicemails. I listened to them both. Didn't call back right away. I wanted space. Not out of cruelty, but because healing needs silence, too.
Dad emailed me.
A real email. It was short. No punctuation. Just, I was wrong. You did good. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a start. And me? Equismart expanded. Thomas introduced me to 3 more investors. Raj, and I signed a federal pilot in August. We hired 5 engineers. We built something real. Something that didn't need to be flashy to be respected. I still think about that toast sometimes. The one where Dad said, "Let's thank your brother for becoming someone, and you for staying exactly where you belong." But now, when I think of it, I don't feel the sting. I feel the power. I found my own place, built my own stage, and they finally saw me, not for what I was not, but for exactly who I am. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between your family's expectations and your own identity? How did you find your freedom? I'd really love to hear your stories in the comments below.